Let's welcome our esteemed panelists. We have Mr. Sumit Malhotra, partner at EY, who will be moderating the panel. He's a seasoned cybersecurity expert with 20 plus years of experience, specializing in cyber transformation and OT IoT security for EY across India, Africa, and the Middle East. He leverages automation driven solutions to help organizations navigate cybersecurity and digital transformation challenges efficiently. Next, we have Mr. Nitin Tyagi, CTO and co-founder of CloudX Solutions. With 8 years of experience, he brings deep expertise in SD-WAN, Zscaler, Prisma, Netscope, and multi-cloud environments. With extensive experience in next-gen firewalls and endpoint security, he has successfully designed and implemented secure, scalable network architectures for enterprises. Then we have Mr. Charanjit Bhatia, IT Security Head at Marks & Spencer. With over 2 decades of experience across industries, he is a dynamic leader specializing in implementing state-of-the-art business applications and systems. A skilled leader, he aligns technology with business goals, delivering complex projects while driving process improvements and risk management. Next, we have Dr. Yusuf Hashmi, Group CISO at Jubilant Bhartiya Group. Dr. Yusuf Hashmi brings over 25 years of expertise in cybersecurity, risk management, threat mitigation, and regulatory compliance. As a thought leader and author in the field of cybersecurity, he has successfully led global initiatives enhancing resilience strategies across industries. Dr. Hashmi is also passionate about mentoring the next generation of cybersecurity professionals and shaping industry standards through extensive research and strategic consulting. Next, we have Mr. Sanjay Kaushal, Global CISO at Orbit TechSol, an action-oriented leader with 23 plus years of expertise in cyber consulting, global CISO roles, pre-sales, solution design, and next-gen SOC. He has led large transformation programs globally, advising CXOs on cybersecurity, enterprise risk, and emerging technologies. Finally, we have Mr. Sandeep Khanna, Director and CISO at UIDAI, with over 2 decades of experience in information security and IT infrastructure. He has led numerous successful digital transformations, recognized as the DSCI Security Leader of the Year and an IDC CSO 100 awardee in 2024. He brings unparalleled expertise in securing organizations' digital landscape. Let's give a round of applause to all our distinguished panelists. And let's have them on stage.
Thanks for the panelists being here. We are missing one person, probably going to join us soon. Thanks for the starting event, sir. It gives me immense pleasure to talk on this topic, predictive analytics for threat detection in the organization, targeting cybersecurity. I think we've been doing predictive analytics for more than 2 decades, but may not be for cybersecurity. It's a great tool to understand from the historical data to analyze and detect what can go wrong, and before it goes wrong, to put a stop on that. I'll probably go open with my panelists on how do you think, what could be a great framework, starting with collection of data. What could be a great framework for this predictive analytics ecosystem? Shall I start with Dr. Hashmi sitting in the center?
Yeah, thank you. I think it's a pretty pertinent question that unless you don't have a framework and approach, I think it goes for a toss. I think before identifying a framework, we must actually identify the use cases for predictive analytics, because predictive analytics has been there for years and years, right? Now, in the context of cybersecurity, something we need to understand, because cyber, when you add a cyber component to it, it takes altogether different shape. Right, so it's not a structured data that you do the financial analysis and then do the predictive analytics, right? So, but when it comes to cyber, I think one of the starting point is the collection of data, right? Because you are not talking to the databases. Basis you do in a typical predictive analytics, you are actually talking to the telemetries of the various technologies which are there, like a EDR or a SOC, right? That's where you actually SOC comes into the picture, right? And SOC is just not feeding now. It has around multiple sources, right? You take FDR, you take WAF sources, you take actually UEBA, you take threat intel, so much of data which is getting accumulated. So I think the normalization is the first thing. And then you do the feature engineering, right? So if I have a data set, what is something I need to identify, right? Is there an anomalous behavior that I am actually trying to actually capture, right? Like multiple logins, right? In a span of quick time, right? This is something that I do a feature engineering, and then I take the identification of the risk analysis. So ultimately, I want to know what is the risk, right? So, and then basis on my risk scoring, I take actions.
Very true.
And then action is something that's very, either you take a manual actions or you actually feed into your SOAR. So I think that's something that the framework ultimately to actually reduce the amount of, the biggest use case, of course, I want to stop breaches happening, right? That's why I use predictive analytics, which is not there currently because it requires a lot of resources, of course. I think that's, we can discuss out.
Oh, that's probably, that opens the Pandora box. Before I jump anywhere, I think our fellow panelist, he runs a couple of SOC for a large set of customers. You want to add on how you're polishing the models, how you're creating those models, or you're leveraging the existing models to ensure that the, the, the products being used, the detection being done is spot on?
Okay, for me, predictive analytics is something is the early warning alarm, right? So, in case of we need to identify whether it's a true or whether it's a false. When it's a true something, we need to take immediate action, else data may lost, and there may be chances of the breach. And in order to the effective predictive analysis, each and every source of the company and the ecosystem should get integrated, either applications, either the routing, switches, and then the web application firewalls, EDR, XDR, and there should be integration, automation, interoperability is a major point. So one device can talk to the another one product can talk to the another one. So we can identify the right alert on time. So it will not convert into the incident and the breach.
I think building models probably will leave it to the product OEMs these days because they've been investing a lot. And training those models will also come from the kind of data sets they are leveraging both in non-prod and production environment. But anything on the continuous improvement, Mr. Sandeep or Mr. Bhatia, if you want to add up on this?
So just to add in terms of building model, so here primarily you are focusing on the ML part of it. Maybe AI is now would also come into it.
It'll play a big role.
So so when you talk of the model building per se, they are standard model buildings in ML. There's nothing which is new. So anomaly detection is one part of it, and pattern building is one. So when I supervise learning, it is pattern, and unsupervised is anomaly detection. And probably with a feedback mechanism, there are other flavors of ML which can be used. Broadly, this is the way you would classify in terms of model building. Now coming on to the aspect of saying continuous improvement, that is something which is a sort of a mantra for anything, everything. You can anywhere you say that there is always scope of improvement, and continuous improvement is something which will always happen. So maybe we could take this question maybe at a later state in terms of when you've spoken about a framework, spoken of the challenges as such. But then since this question has been posed now, let me just add here, is that, say for example, we just talked about the data ingestion part and how we would be consuming it. Now data ingestion and bringing into a lake and then subsequently normalizing it and pre-processing information is a task itself.
It's a big task.
It's a task itself. And you'll find that every day it's a challenge in terms of saying, okay, today the log format of this is changed, iska change ho gaya because the X firewall has got an upgrade in terms of his, so they've changed the format. So now what to do about it? How do you now start parsing it and bringing it and normalizing it? So when I say continuous improvement, this is something business as usual, but this is also part of the continuous improvement in terms of saying, how do I manage to say that, okay, going forward, I don't get into these complexities or I don't get bogged down with these complexities. So this is one part of when I say in terms of continuous improvement we can talk of. And maybe subsequent, when we talk of other things, we can, again, so continuous improvement is something which is a giver. It should happen every time and any time because that's what we are here for as practitioners.
Correct. And onboarding log collections from so many sources that's also a tricky one. Newer technologies, newer connectors, so many things to be looked upon.
Absolutely. You said connectors. So connectors is a task itself. So now the point is that my implementation of this log collection which is happening is probably onto my SOC, onto say my SIEM, or probably onto a data lake and then bringing it for say analytics, predictive analytics is something what has to be seen. So if I afresh want to bring into a data lake, I'll be building connectors for anything and everything. But upfront on a SOC, probably I would have connectors upfront for at least for a bunch of this. For certain specifics, for legacy, we will have to build connectors.
Rightly said. I'll come back to my last panelist who's sitting closest to me. Mr. Bhatia, you want to add up anything on the framework, collection, testing, anything on the model side?
Yeah, on the framework or the model which we can start in the predictive technology is we can go back to the days of Lockheed Martin kill chain when it was started, the first, wherein we got to know how the attacks are related, what are the various stages. So these are the guiding framework when we started to learn or when I started to learn in the cybersecurity era. The second one was the MITRE ATT&CK framework, which is very, very good, popular framework. And we need to focus on that so that we can understand how an attack persists on any of our customers. And what are the various ways the attacker will use to come inside your perimeter or your fence. There are multiple tactics, techniques, and processes through which they can come inside. So these are some of the important things which are, I think, the basic building blocks on which the things like predictive analytics, etc., are working as of now. So these are some of the things which CISO should be knowing about, and also the partners like SOC vendors, SIEM vendors who are there. They're already incorporating all those things up to date on their solutions. From a technology or OEM point of view, they are also evolving based on the evolving or emerging threats or attacks which are happening nowadays. And as they are growing in with reduction in the time to response, detect and response, so are attackers coming up with newer ways of making or breaking the fence in. So there is always a tussle of war, and we need to ensure which predictive model is also giving us the right thing. There are multiple solutions in the market. They are also providing or helping the customers, but we need to see and analyze with a human touch whether these are correct or not.
Well, rightly said. But before we go deeper into it, I think just want to check on the challenges which we are facing as an industry. What do you think? What are the key challenges in the implementation part? Dr. Hashmi, if you want to add.
I think challenges, there will always be challenges in actually trying to achieve something new, right, which is not there as part of the normal, right? Especially when you talk about predictive analytics in threat detection and response. Both detection and response plays a major role in, that's what you're trying to achieve, right? I should be able to detect threats and how quickly I can respond to threats. And that could be manual and automated as well. So I think the challenges is, of course, you need knowledge of your environment. That's the first thing you should have. You should have the entire understanding of your architecture, the estate, the assets, because that's where you're trying to talk and fetch the data from, right? So I have to have complete visibility of my enterprise asset. That's the biggest challenge. We never get the denominator, right? We are not the asset owner. It's something else. Somewhere else is managed, not us. But we are the key stakeholders and the user of the assets. Because unless you don't have the visibility, there's no way you would be able to achieve and protection for those assets. Right?
Shadow IT, you're focusing towards shadow ITs or shadow AIs nowadays?
No, assets is something that we never get usually the infra team is the owner of the assets, right? So, and you usually never get the CMD. CMD has failed miserably over a period of years. Right? We all know that. That is really impacting security because the visibility, getting the right denominator is a big challenge. We are still struggling to get that, right? So that's the biggest challenge, to have that visibility factor. And of course, predictive analytics kind of the resources is needed. It's not computing resources. The resources you need to manage your predictive. You need data scientists, right? You need cybersecurity professionals. So alone data scientists would not be able to actually gain that insight unless they have the knowledge of cyber, because you are not dealing with business data, you're dealing with your telemetry data, right? Your IP addresses and all. So that's understanding is a must, right? So how you are able to address that challenge to bring in the right set of skill set along with the resources.
You spoke about resources, and I'll probably jump on to similar set. What about the investments? How do you think investments are available to us?
So again, taking a cue from the compute part, which you just spoke of. So of course, unfortunately, Jason Huang had a scare last week because what he lost. But then compute still remains at the core of
It's hard.
ML and AI.
Yeah.
You know, so it is an intensive job. So that is a cost factor. You know? So that is something which that will, and of course, as he said, the resources as such. These resources are not just these data scientists, and maybe those expertise would cost you. That is there. So that is one thing. In adding to more in terms of challenges, I would say would be that in terms of the data quality, you know, so and the data quantity as such. So whatever you are ingesting, you know, you can ingest anything and everything, but then to normalize it and to see it, it's a Herculean task. And believe me, we all are from the security industry, and we know that it is every day, every second day you find that your parser is broken and you say you have these challenges. Same is going to be the case here. Yeah. So until us jo padega nahi to karega kya, you know, as he said. So it has to, it does not make any sense to him then. So that data quality is there. Now, when I talk of data quantity here, in terms of saying that when you start ingesting the quantum, what you have to ingest in terms of the sizing, in terms of the infra available, and the latency it is going to bring in. How you handle that? That is something which has to be.
Yeah, and the slower it is, the poorer it is.
Yeah. Because after all, when you're talking predictive analytics, yes, I'm predicting an occurrence, but it can't be that it's something like Ayer shocks us again and say, "Ki khade ho jao" types, you know. So it should not be that. And I should be well aware, okay, that he's going to make me stand again, and then do another stretch.
From the historical data.
From the historical data. So that is one. The other challenge would be in terms of privacy. Obviously, DPTP will start, you know, giving a lot of learning lessons maybe in the next 6 months or so. And that is one aspect. See, because when you start ingesting anything and everything, you may also be inadvertently ingesting a lot of information which might become sensitive in nature. So when it's sensitive in nature, even your logs are sensitive in nature because they are of essence to an attacker. You know, they make sense to an attacker. So that is the essence. So then coming on to the privacy aspect of it, that I might probably ingest something which might evade my privacy. That is one thing. Someone talked about SASE and saying that I'm going to see hash password and I'll tell him what password he was seeing is a privacy evasion. You know, so I would say so now when you kind of see this kind of visibility, you have to safeguard those guardrails of privacy have to come in place. Very, very essential. Again, the other thing is in terms of saying that, you know, the attacker is always ahead of you. That's what is said. So he will come in with new patterns, new techniques. So now, as I said, ML is not as smart as it would be. So it will have to be trained on a continuous basis. So when there are new attacks, new techniques, tactics, then you probably have to evolve yourself. You have to evolve your model also in that way. So these are challenges which I think which will be there as part of a predictive analytics.
You touched upon compliance and the amount of data we are pushing in. I'll probably move to Mr. Sanjay to add on. How do you think you're managing false positive with the kind of current tech landscape? Because this is one thing which you'll be doing day in, day out for your customers when you're managing the threat detection.
So basically now AI/ML is a need of the cybersecurity. So every solution is getting integrated with this AI/ML, right? So there are two kind of things. One is the alert is generated by the AI/ML, and then the human intervention is still required. This true whether it's a true or this is a false. So this shows the complete visibility because everything is getting integrated with the log collectors, and then the algorithms work on the algorithm based on the data, structured data and the unstructured data. They show through the dashboards kind of alerts, what alerts you are getting on a priority alert, the P1 alert, the P2 alerts. There's a predictive alerts. and then you need to be finalized whether this is a true and false. So if it's a true, just immediate action has to be taken on the predictive alerts, and then we can safeguard our the firm organizations based on that.
So we spoke about quite a few challenges. I mean, we missed one thing, legacy systems, how we can leverage inputs or logs, or, I mean, how can we prepare those legacy systems to get the right set of logs and events to such an engine? It's an open query. I mean, if you want to jump in.
Okay, so there is a method in order to integrate the legacy systems also, either syslog based or SNMP based or agent based. So we can install into the legacy systems and pull the alerts. There are two mechanisms, the push mechanism and the pull mechanism. Both work in order to collect the log from legacy to the next gen ecosystems. So we can have the previous as well as the new one integrations. There's a method is always there.
And especially when we are non-IT ecosystem, OTs of the world or IoTs component. Dr. Hashmi, you want to add on this, or Mr. Bhatia, you want to add on this?
Yeah, OT it plays a it's altogether different environment
It's a different
altogether.
world.
Even the alerts are different than what we
Yes.
usually receive in a typical IT environment because we have manufacturing units across both in pharma and chemical and all. So we usually not actually getting inside that. We are trying to get into alert monitoring from the OT side. It's a journey. I think it will take some time, right? Because touching the OT system itself takes a lot of courage.
It's a tricky.
Right, and even if you take the courage, then you would not be allowed to actually by the engineering team, by the operations team. So, but yes, I think when we talk over Industry 4.5.0, it's a must. You have to actually understand because the moment the regulation comes in, right now there's no regulation, but when and slowly and gradually that moment is coming when you have to have a regulation into your manufacturing facilities, I think then it's become pretty challenging because all of a sudden you have to actually address this change of regulation. You have to start monitoring every devices, whether it is a SCADA or a PLC, right? So, and your IoTs. I think it's a need now because of the exposure the OT systems now have as compared to our 10 years, 5 years back because digital transformation journey is already started. So you have to some point touch the outside world with the OT world, which is there and confined in your air gap system, what we tell, right? So there's no more air gap anymore now.
I think that makes tough for a CISO's job that management want to see everything on their dashboard, want to connect everything on the go, and still want to keep everything secure. So that's a tricky one. I mean, I'm just keen to look into any thoughts from your side, Mr. Bhatia, anything on the challenges or towards the emerging threat landscape?
Challenges, okay, I will just slightly touch on the legacy system. The legacy systems problem is that they were built long time ago. Now, if the manufacturer or the OEM itself has stopped supporting it, they also have a limited capability of generating the logs. Now, the logs which they are generating, are they useful in today's context or not, is something which we need to understand. And there are multiple ways for the attack vector will try to emulate or simulate or exploit the old vulnerabilities which haven't been fixed. So this is a very tough question to answer, and also, I mean, because there is no further scope on the legacy development, so we'll have to live with whatever the logs are being generated and the logs information which we can derive from there to be proactive or predictive in ensuring that we timely remediate the threats which are coming in. On the emerging threats, I think what we can do is we can look into some models like MITRE, Caldera, etc., wherein you can see the adversarial emulation, how the adversary can emulate using the tools, how sophisticated the tools are, and how they can come in various ways inside. Also, you can look into the CTI feeds from MITRE, which are also kind of open source. I mean, you can look into that so that you can build into the additional intel which you have already with respect to the solutions OEMs who are providing some threat intel, and the SOC or the SOAR team who's bringing in the threat advisories and multiple things where they are correlating it, making it industry rich context, and also informative to your own environment.
More bespoke.
Yeah, more bespoke model.
I think, Mr. Sandeep, you mentioned that data quality and quantity, and he's talking about legacy system not generating that kind of data, and they both talk in a cohesive manner. What about your touch point? You mentioned about the ML. ML can do a bit. How about if somebody is poisoning that ML model? Or we are poisoning the data itself?
So when I say poisoning the data model, yes. So of course, the supply chain issue here, which we are talking of, and it is obviously a big concern in case I have a model which per se would predict something which is not desirable. You know, it is probably channelizing me to a path where I should not be going. So that becomes a risk to me. And that is where, when you say that there has to be more of efforts which are there when you validate that model. Upfront, obviously, what happens is that to build a system from scratch is obviously a huge task, a tall ask. Probably we would source a model, a tooling like this, bring it here. You would have a lot of now solutions available in the market where you have a data lake and which can probably ingest your entire security logging and bring it there, and also do your alerting and also do your predictive analytics in it, and more than that.
And
but yes,
so just want to talk about the elephant in the room. How about AI-based attacks?
So when I talk of AI-based attacks, yes, because the point is that, as I said, AI-based attacks, it is like a copybook. He would bring in, it would be like, it could be like sort of it'll be a barge of this which will happen. So, but then AIs are now evolving. When I say they were noisy earlier, now probably subsequently they might not become noisy also. When they do not become noisy, predictive analytics will become a risk, will become an issue here.
It will be a challenging one.
Yeah.
Yeah. You want to add up on this, the emerging threat piece?
So definitely there can be the multiple ways, as you rightly say, so-called AAI, Adversarial Artificial Intelligence, right?
Correct.
So adversarial machine learning, where hacker is learning your complete portfolio, whatever is built by the AI. Then if it took it up, definitely I know the pros and cons of the complete infrastructure. Easy for me to attack anything and take it the information vulnerable of, and how long the company can protect themselves. So the things come like deception is one of the technology where you can identify the TTPs, technique and the procedures, the attacker mindset, and then protect the companies in terms of the predictive analytic and analysis. It says the MITRE is also the part of it. MITRE's framework which shows the what mitigation you require, what are the problems in the based on the log. There is also predictive things, and the AI. Threat intel is also part of it. The traffic coming from this also the another part of the visibilities.
Mm-hmm. You touched upon how attacker is learning about you. Probably some form of data exfiltration is what you're touching about. And in today's world, when we don't know what are our true data set, where all it is lying, who all have the access, what kind of systems we're using, it makes a little more difficult to put a stopgap on that and put a real kind of predictive analytics on that. Because we ourselves, Dr. Hashmi also touched on that we don't know about the true asset source. And this AI ecosystem, where one Gen AI system is learning from another Gen AI system, scrapping the Googles of the world and scrapping the OpenAI. And today's hacker have access to all these things. So how do you think, what could be the mitigation strategies for these kind of challenges? We have spoken about challenges, we've spoken about the framework. I thought it's good to move towards how to put it closer to these challenges, or what could be the possible solutions. Dr. Hashmi, you want to add it?
See, the advent of AI, which means the speed of execution is the key here, right? How quickly I can actually incubate AI into each of the 7 or 8 steps of MITRE, for example, right? And then that's from the offensive side, and how quickly you can create a defensive mechanism. So the quickly they are able to actually move into the various stages, the last stages from recon to actually command and control and data exfiltration. You have to take your approach in the same manner, right? To be in sync with what the attacker would be actually happening. Because if you miss one of, for example, if you're doing before command and control, C to C, there's a lateral movement, right?
Correct.
So the same way, how predictive analytics would help me to actually reach out to every stages of that chain, right? That's what is most important to actually use technology like predictive to, because you have to respond. Because by the time you think about, you do analysis, the time is gone, right? Time is a factor. How soon you can actually take actions, right? How many of you know order loop, right? That's how you actually help predictive to how you take decision, how you act. That's most important. Otherwise, by the time you decide, it's gone.
It's gone. And especially in the era of when the insider threats is a bigger chunk.
Yeah, absolutely.
How do we tackle such challenges?
More of the, I think, external insider threat is something we actually deal daily. External happens once in a blue moon, right? But the insider is something that you have to deal in with daily, on daily basis, right? Whether it is an employee, a disgruntled employee, or an employee who has malicious intent, sharing data exfiltration, right? DLPs fails in such cases. That's where the behavior is so very important in predictive. So UEBA plays a key role, predictive, in order to identify the behaviors. That because not every action is done instantly. It happens over a period of time. So which means there's a pattern of behavior which you actually analyze and see, predict, hey, look, this or 2 or 3 days back, this employee will upload a data on a cloud drive. How would you be able to identify and detect? Only by actually assessing the behavior of the insider. Whether it is a fraud or whether it is a data exfil. I think predictive analytics plays a major role in this use cases. So that's very important to know that your use cases have to be very clear what you are trying to achieve from such an approaches, right? So that's how you are able to actually gain an edge over the outside attackers, right? So the speed of the execution is very important decision making, because you alone, a security guy, can't take decisions. You have to collaborate with the other teams also, right? So I can just create a sole rule and just block the firewall for a certain kind of traffic analysis. I have to get a sign off, a buy-in from the infra team in order to take that certain actions or block that access and all.
Rightly said. Pushing from a human behavioral analytics, nowadays the insider threat will be more on the AI agents, setting in the system, creating more threat scenarios. But just jumping on, how do you think the data governance challenges, Mr. Bhatti, you may want to touch on this. It's a big area.
Yeah, data governance from predictive analysis. Yeah, so data governance is also very important, as my fellow have already covered the topic initially, starting from data collection and then processing of data and analyzing it with the help of humans to avoid the false positive, etc. So there has to be a process which has to be duly filled in and followed in. And after that, maybe we can say that, okay, this is false positive, this is true positive, and this is something which we are not aware. So let's get in touch with the customer itself. Maybe he can provide more intel on that to provide a conviction whether it is correct or not. So I think this is the entire work wherein not only the customer, but also the OEM solution vendor and also the service provider like SOC vendors have to closely work in. And the process has to build in such that this is being adhered, complied in correctly. So that's my take on the governance part.
I'm just being cognizant of time. We do have some areas. We understand predictive analytics is being used for threat analysis, but there are more areas it can be used, especially in cyber. You want to touch upon on this, Mr. Sandeep?
So yes, one is you could talk of risks and vulnerability,
Management.
which is there. Management is there. You could talk of fraud prevention. Fraud prevention, I'll just throw some more light. So fraud prevention today, as you see, cybercrime is something which is a huge industry. And so fraud prevention obviously is something which, so depending on the use case which you have, or other, what is the business case which you have within your company as such, basis that, because it's all about if those frauds are only going to hit you in terms of, may hit you financially. So if you can bring in predictive analytics into that, and instead of running those fraud routines, so ascertain that there has a fraud taken place, and then probably look at it. So if you can prevent a fraud, it would be a much better option.
Rightly said. I mean, fraud through a phishing email or a business email compromise, that's one of the key challenge I think every organization is facing. Any intake on that?
I think the very strong use cases which will really help me to actually detect and respond is my breach likelihood, right? Through predictive analytics, I should be able to identify where does my organ stands. Actually, that's what the first question the board asked, that how likely we would be breached or attacked. I think along with anomaly detection and all, because if you don't detect your anomalies, you would not be able to predict itself. So there's a sequence of use cases which need to be met. Removal of false positives, right? So that's the biggest challenge, because we are not dealing with signature based. All the SIEMs are rule based. So how we can bring in predictive to actually reduce my false positives is very important. And then of course it should tell me that where do I stand? 60% chance of breach or 50%. So that will actually create a lot of buzz in order to quantify buzz, that what action I need to take basis on my likelihood of the breach. How do I reduce? That's the action point. That how do you reduce my likelihood of a breach? I think that's a crux of doing predictive analysis in this area.
I mean, I'm open for certain queries from the audience. You want to go for any questions on this topic? Though we are in a world where detection itself is usually take 270 days. That's an IBM data. We're talking about predictive analysis. Any questions on this topic? We're good. I think thanks very much. Okay. I mean, lovely. We'll probably address those. Just summarizing, but we started talking about the data collection, the feature selection, and the kind of models we've been using, how they've been trained upon, and the governance model being used to actually ensure that both the insider and exsider threats are mitigated, the false positive are reduced, and we actually do the detection before the attack happens. On that note, I'll thank my panel. Thanks for the lovely audience. Oh, we have a question? Oh, lovely. I couldn't see that. Sorry. How do organizations validate and interpret predictive analytics results to ensure actionable insights rather than just probabilistic risk scores that may not translate into effective security measure? That's a trick one. Who want to take this? So if I say the nutshell, how the organization are validating.
So the validation part here in this case, of course, risk score will always remain there. So it's always about quantification of your of the part of it. But when I say validating and interpreting, probably is both those reviews which take place quarterly and on an annual basis. So MRMs are ones which will probably where you can present and see that how effectiveness this is. That is one way of doing those checks which is there.
I think another aspect was, see, risk will never be zero. We will always live with some form of. Every day we move out of our home, we are with some risk. We may not reach home. That's the kind of risk we live in. I think next question is how small organizations who do not have a threat detection platform, what should be our foundation steps? That's an interesting one to build something. You want to take this one?
Okay, so the organization which doesn't have the threat detection platforms, they at least they can collect the logs, and based on the logs, they start the analysis of the logs with respect to the what alert is coming, And then whatever the ecosystem they have, they can prevent their infrastructure. Like example, if they have the firewall called the UTM. So UTM has a multiple functions and features. You can enable multiple blades as well as the multiple like threat detection. So there is also the coming with the UTMs. It's a basic, when people say they don't have anything, they have at least one firewall, right? And talking to the endpoint now started with the EDR. So they can harden proof their endpoint where the insider threat we can protect from the insider threat.
Mm-hmm.
And then every OEM solution is a console where alert is going to the OEM consoles. This shows these are the attack and alerts and take a remediation action on those alerts. That's the way.
So probably unified threat management platform
Yes.
could be the starting point. And yes, it goes without saying, managing the sanity, the basics need to be sorted first because 80% of the attacks can be managed through that. The next question we have, how we can integrate with the existing vulnerability management solution. Dr. Hashmi, you want to take this? You touched upon this in the journey.
That's the biggest use cases of AI, right? Is that with regard to predictive analytics?
Yeah, how we can integrate a vulnerability management platform with probably predictive analytics.
I think, which means that you should know that a typical vulnerability is being exploiting where. So that threat intel feeds plays a major role because all the vulnerabilities before OEM releases it as the NVD, it gets into pre-NVD stage, which means that usually it will take around 1 to 2 months time before actual vulnerability is being published in the NVD database, which means through chatbots, through discussions, right? That's how you arrive. I think getting that feed is very important to know that there's certain vulnerabilities or an asset which might become vulnerable in future. And because there are a lot of data which is there, and how will you actually incubate your predictability of that vulnerability being exploited, right? So there are certain mechanism, if you're using a certain tool, you have EPS, which is exploit prediction. You would be able to predict an asset being vulnerable because you are getting, so the feeds coming into a different outside sources into your VM is a must in order to predict that this vulnerability is going to be exploited, because those discussions would be there around.
Our next question is actually interrelated. Ms. Bhatti, you want to take this? Internal threat detection, how AI can help on internal threat detection? I think this goes hand in hand with the...
Yeah. So internal threat detection will mean it will
with the help of AI.
Yeah, with the help of AI. It will mean that it is very, very specific to the customer, and it is very, very much relevant. I mean, in this, I mean, you'll have to look into the solutions which you already have, and you also need to see your own asset inventory with the context of the organization or with the asset, how you relate the asset risk with that. And as soon as you get any alert on that, you may go ahead with the remediation process. That is number one. Before that also, I mean, if you do a risk assessment part, as Sandeep has already mentioned earlier, so if you have done the risk assessment of the inventory, the assets, etc., you'll get to know which are your riskiest assets, what is the priority of it getting exploited in near future. And then accordingly, you build the phased plan of remediation. So if you are working on them, then you need to better close them as soon as possible.
I mean, if we can add on, I mean, just want to add on this. I think AI can be leveraged to analyze large chunk of internal data and then getting a faster response. That could be one way. There are many other ways to leveraging it. You want to add on this? We have one more last question that's on the opinion on open source tools over proprietary tool. I think that's...
So they're also good. I mean, you can go for a MISP or other areas wherein you can, especially for the small companies or organization who don't have the budget, etc., budget constraint, maybe they can try or look into those facts. Also, there are a lot of advisories from certain. They can register themselves from there, and they can get useful feeds from there and try to relate within their organization and then act accordingly.
Mr. Sandeep, you want to add?
So open source tooling is, yes, you should. Why not? But the point is that the selection is important. To say that, okay, tomorrow you pick up the Elk stack. I know that it is supported by the community. It will run through. It should not happen. I bring up something which probably is not supported in future. So that is one thing you do. And it's always a mix of proprietary and open source which you should do so that you would get a solution which would be more mature in nature. Yeah.
And at times, open source are little more resource hungry. That one take you need to.
So it all depends again the choice of the tool.
Choice of tool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So when I say, so you talk about health stack, yes, very well mature.
I think before adopting an open source, the knowledge of the platform is very much required, because that's you're trying to outsource it to an full-fledged. If you're not so knowledge of that product, even if is a much, because you have the ability to customize. That being an open source, I think the ability to customize as much as possible, you will have more ability than buying a COTS product, right? So that's what the purpose of open source.
And that, I think, on this note, we'd like to wrap up this session. Thanks for being patient. Thanks for listening to us. You've been a lovely audience. Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you.
Thank you.
A big thank you to our panelists, and a very big thank you to everyone for their active participation. And I would also like to thank our online participants as well, as we still have 150 plus online participants. So thank you for staying with us. So I would now like to request Mr. Ajay Manchanda to come up on stage and felicitate our esteemed panelists.